The silence before a divine shift often feels heavier than the battle itself. You may wake on this Saturday carrying questions no one can answer, wounds no one can see, and prayers that seem delayed by heaven. Yet there are moments when God places a mark upon certain days, separating them from ordinary time and filling them with hidden purpose. May 16th is not presented as a random sunrise, but as a moment where heaven whispers that something long-awaited is beginning to move. The soul that has endured quietly, trusted painfully, and waited faithfully is about to recognize that God never lost sight of their name. There are days that pass like drifting shadows, ordinary and forgettable, carrying no visible sign that heaven has touched them. And then there are days marked by God Himself, days quietly chosen long before the sun ever rose upon them. Human eyes may see another Saturday, another date upon a calendar, another routine morning filled with familiar burdens, yet eternity often hides its greatest movements beneath what appears common. The soul rarely recognizes sacred timing while standing inside it. Only later does a person look back and realize that one ordinary day became the dividing line between who they were and who they were becoming. God has always worked through marked moments. Not every season carries the same spiritual weight. Some days are preparation, some are endurance, some are lessons written in silence. But there are also days when heaven decides the waiting has lasted long enough. These moments do not always arrive with thunder. Often they come softly, almost unnoticed, like light entering a locked room through the smallest crack. A conversation changes something within you. A burden suddenly loses its grip. A door begins to open where walls once stood. What seemed delayed begins to move with unexpected force. God marks certain days because He knows the human heart needs reminders that divine timing still exists. Many people imagine transformation as instant and dramatic, but God frequently changes lives through gradual awakenings. Before He changes circumstances, He changes vision. Before He changes direction, He changes desire. Before He lifts a person publicly, He works deeply within them privately. That is why some of the hardest seasons are also the holiest ones. Heaven is not absent during delay. Heaven is preparing the soul to survive the blessing it once begged for. The person who prayed years ago is not the same person standing here now. Pain has altered them. Waiting has refined them. Loss has humbled them. Silence has deepened them. There is something mysterious about the way God marks a moment. Nothing outward may appear different at first. The same walls remain around you. The same responsibilities wait for you. The same battles may still exist. Yet inwardly, a shift begins to happen. Fear no longer sounds convincing. Doubt loses some of its authority. Hope returns quietly, not as noise but as certainty. The soul begins sensing that it has reached the edge of one chapter and is standing before another. This is often how divine change begins, not through spectacle, but through inner awakening. C.S. Lewis once understood that the deepest spiritual realities often arrive disguised in ordinary clothing. God does not always announce Himself through visible miracles because He desires trust deeper than sight. A marked day may appear disappointingly normal to those expecting fireworks, yet heaven's fingerprints are often found in subtle things. A new peace, a strange courage, a sudden clarity, the strength to continue when yesterday you wanted to quit. These are not accidents. These are signs that God is moving beneath the visible surface of life. There are people listening who have spent months, perhaps years, believing they were forgotten. They watched others move ahead while their own prayers remained suspended in silence. They carried disappointment so quietly that even those closest to them never noticed the weight. Yet God wastes nothing endured in faith. Every hidden tear, every lonely prayer, every exhausted moment of obedience becomes part of the unseen foundation upon which He builds future strength. The marked day does not erase the suffering that came before it, but it reveals that suffering was never meaningless. Sometimes God allows the night to grow darker because dawn is nearer than the weary heart realizes. Human beings often measure time by clocks, but God measures it by readiness. He knows when the soul has matured enough to carry what once would have destroyed it. He knows when wounds have healed enough for trust to return. He knows when humility has become strong enough to survive success. And when that moment arrives, heaven begins to move with purpose that no human resistance can permanently stop. The tragedy is that many people stand inside a marked moment while still believing nothing will ever change. Discouragement blinds them to the sacredness of the hour they are living through. They expect God to move according to their imagination and miss the quieter ways He transforms a life. Yet faith has never depended upon visible evidence alone. Faith is the willingness to believe that God may already be working even when the evidence remains incomplete. Faith continues walking even when certainty has not fully arrived. That is the painful beauty of the waiting season. Most people would never choose it willingly, yet some of the deepest works of God are formed there. The human soul naturally assumes delay means rejection, but heaven often uses waiting not to punish a person, but to prepare them. What feels like abandonment may actually be construction taking place beneath the surface of your life. God is rarely inactive during silence. He is usually doing the kind of work that can only be accomplished away from applause, away from distraction, and away from the comfort of immediate answers. The waiting season strips away illusions. T exposes how fragile human control truly is. In easier days, people often believe their strength comes from confidence, plans, or visible progress. But when doors remain closed and prayers seem unanswered, the soul begins confronting deeper truths. It learns how dependent it truly is upon God. It learns that faith is not proven when everything arrives quickly, but when obedience survives disappointment. The person who continues trusting after repeated delays possesses a strength the world cannot easily understand. Many souls grow bitter during waiting because they interpret delay as cruelty. They ask why others seem blessed while they remain trapped in uncertainty. They compare journeys, forgetting that God writes different stories for different hearts. Some lives are built quickly, others are built deeply. The deeper the foundation required, the longer the hidden work often takes. A tree meant to survive fierce storms cannot grow with shallow roots. God sometimes slows the process because He sees dangers ahead that human eyes cannot yet recognize. What appears late from Earth's perspective may actually be mercy from heaven's perspective. There is also a loneliness unique to sea. Sons of preparation. Friends may not understand why your life feels suspended. Family may question why nothing seems to move forward. Even your own mind may begin accusing you at night, whispering that perhaps your prayers were foolish all along. Yet these moments reveal whether faith was built upon God Himself or merely upon the expectation of quick results. The waiting season separates shallow belief from enduring trust. It burns away illusions until only what is real remains. C.S. Lewis understood that suffering and delay often become strange instruments through which God reshapes the soul. Human beings spend much of life asking for comfort, while God is often focused upon transformation. Comfort alone rarely deepens character. Immediate answers rarely produce lasting wisdom. But waiting has a way of uncovering what success hides. It reveals pride, fear, impatience, and hidden idols. It forces the soul to confront itself honestly. And though painful, this honesty becomes necessary for spiritual growth. Some people are still grieving versions of life they expected to have by now. They imagined certain doors would open sooner. They assumed certain relationships would remain. Why believed certain prayers would already be answered. When reality unfolded differently, disappointment settled into the heart like heavy fog. Yet God often removes what would have weakened your future strength. Sometimes He delays blessings because your current condition would mishandle them. Sometimes He allows isolation because too many voices were drowning out His own. Sometimes He permits confusion because certainty would have caused pride before maturity had fully formed. The waiting season also teaches endurance, and endurance is sacred. A weak soul collapses under pressure, but a refined soul learns how to remain steady even in uncertainty. God is not merely interested in giving blessings, He is interested in building people capable of carrying them faithfully. Many pray for open doors while remaining unprepared for the responsibility waiting behind those doors. So heaven works slowly, patiently shaping the inner life until character becomes stronger than desire. There are hidden victories taking place within you even now. The fact that you are still praying after disappointment is growth. The fact that you still hope after delay is growth. The fact that you have not completed. Completely surrendered to bitterness means God is sustaining something alive within your spirit. People often overlook these quieter miracles because they are waiting for dramatic change, but inward transformation always comes before outward breakthrough. The waiting season was never designed to destroy you. It was shaping vision, refining motives, strengthening faith, and teaching dependence upon God rather than circumstance. Every delayed answer carried lessons your future self will one day understand. Every lonely night developed spiritual muscles that comfort could never produce. Every unanswered question forced the soul to seek God more deeply than surface-level belief ever could. And though the process felt unbearably slow, heaven was not wasting a single moment of it. And while heaven is shaping a person in secret, it is also preparing movements that cannot yet be seen. This is why God often works quietly before he works powerfully. Human beings are drawn to visible signs, dramatic moments, and unmistakable miracles. Yet some of the greatest divine movements begin in silence so small they are almost ignored. A seed beneath the soil makes no sound while it is becoming a tree. WN does not arrive with shouting. It slowly pushes darkness aside until the world suddenly realizes morning has come. In the same way, God frequently begins changing a life long before the evidence becomes visible to others. Many people miss holy moments because they expect God to move only through spectacle. They wait for thunder while heaven is speaking through whispers. They look for immediate transformation while God is patiently rearranging deeper things beneath the surface. The soul often mistakes silence for absence because it does not understand that quiet seasons can carry tremendous spiritual activity. Just because something cannot be seen does not mean nothing is happening. Some of God's most important work takes place where human eyes cannot reach. There are battles unfolding beyond visible understanding. God may already be loosening chains you believed permanent. He may already be moving people, opportunities, and circumstances into position while you remain unaware of it. Heaven's preparation is rarely noisy. The greatest changes often begin invisibly because faith must mature before sight arrives. If every answer appeared instantly, trust would never deepen beyond convenience. But when God moves quietly, the soul learns patience, discernment, and dependence upon him rather than outward signs. C.S. Lewis often recognized that divine reality exists beyond what the physical eye can immediately grasp. Human beings' lives surrounded by eternal things they scarcely notice. Pride convinces people that only what is visible matters, but faith understands that unseen realities often shape visible outcomes long before they appear. A person may feel stuck while God is secretly redirecting their future. They may believe heaven is silent while unseen doors are slowly unlocking in places they cannot yet imagine. Sometimes the quietness of God is itself an act of mercy. Loud answers can feed human pride. Public miracles can tempt the soul to worship blessings more than the one who gives them. So God often works gently, teaching the heart to recognize his presence without needing constant proof. The spiritually mature soul eventually learns that God's silence does not equal his absence. In fact, silence often becomes the environment where trust grows strongest. Think about how many changes begin invisibly in ordinary life. A heart slowly heals before the fire. See ever smiles again. Wisdom develops quietly through years of suffering before anyone notices maturity. Courage forms in hidden battles no audience ever sees. In the same way, heaven's movements frequently begin beneath the visible layer of reality. God prepares inward victories before outward breakthroughs. He restores identity before he restores opportunity. He rebuilds strength before he opens new doors. There are listeners carrying frustration because nothing dramatic has happened yet. They expected immediate answers, yet their circumstances still appear unchanged. But power is not always loud. Sometimes the strongest movements of God are unfolding precisely when life feels most ordinary. The soul may not recognize the shift immediately because transformation is already happening internally. Fear no longer controls you the way it once did. Discouragement no longer destroys you as easily as before. Your prayers have become deeper, less selfish, more sincere. These quiet changes are evidence that heaven is already at work. The enemy often uses noise to create confusion, panic, and distraction. God, however, frequently uses stillness to create clarity. That is why people in Ting seasons sometimes feel stripped of distractions they once depended upon. Silence forces attention toward deeper things. It removes the illusions that constant activity can create. And though uncomfortable, this quietness becomes sacred ground where the soul begins hearing truths it previously ignored. Even nature reflects this principle. Rivers carve valleys over time without announcing their power. Stars move across the heavens in silence. Seasons change gradually until suddenly the world no longer looks the same. God's movements carry similar mystery. He does not rush to satisfy human impatience because eternal purposes are larger than temporary emotions. He sees outcomes beyond present understanding. He knows what must be developed before certain blessings arrive. There are moments when a person believes they are standing still, yet spiritually, they are already moving into a new chapter. Heaven may already be dismantling what no longer belongs in your future. Certain relationships may fade because they cannot follow where God is leading you. Certain comforts may disappear because dependence upon them would weaken what heaven is building within you. The process feels confusing. Sing only because human vision is limited to the present moment while God sees the entire journey at once. Quiet seasons are not empty seasons. They are often filled with invisible preparation, hidden protection, and sacred rearrangement. And one day, what God has been doing silently will become impossible to deny. The breakthrough that finally appears publicly will have roots stretching back through every lonely prayer, every delayed answer, and every unseen moment where heaven was working long before you realized it. And when heaven begins working beneath the surface, it often touches the deepest wounds first. Before God restores direction, He restores the broken places within the soul that pain tried to destroy. What broke you emotionally was real. The disappointment was real. The betrayal was real. The nights of exhaustion, the silent tears, the moments where you questioned your worth and wondered whether life would ever feel whole again, none of it was imaginary. Human hearts are fragile things, and this world has a way of bruising them deeply. Yet emotional brokenness does not mean spiritual defeat. A wounded soul is not the same as a ruined soul. Many people confuse pain with the failure. They assume that because they struggled emotionally, they must somehow be weak in faith. But even the strongest hearts can become weary under prolonged sorrow. God never expected human beings to move through suffering untouched. Grief leaves marks. Rejection leaves echoes. Loss changes the way a person sees the world. The danger is not that pain exists, the danger is allowing pain to define identity. Wounds may explain part of your story, but they were never meant to become your permanent name. There are people listening who learned how to survive while secretly falling apart inside. They smiled in public while carrying storms no one could see. They fulfilled responsibilities while inwardly battling exhaustion, fear, and loneliness. Some became so accustomed to disappointment that hope itself began to feel dangerous. It seems safer not to expect anything good at all. After enough heartbreak, the soul starts building walls simply to avoid being wounded again. Yet walls built for protection often become prisons that block healing too. C.S. Lewis understood the strange ache of human suffering. He recognized that pain has the ability to shake everything people once trust. About life. Yet he also understood that brokenness can become the place where deeper truths finally enter. A shattered heart is painful, but it is also open. Pride weakens there. Illusions collapse there. The soul stops pretending it can save itself. And in that vulnerable place, God often begins rebuilding something stronger than what existed before. The enemy wants wounded people to believe they are permanently damaged. He whispers that because you were hurt, you are disqualified from purpose. Because you struggled emotionally, you will never fully recover. Because certain people walked away, you must somehow be unworthy of love. But heaven does not measure people according to the wounds they carry. God sees beyond the scars into the soul that still survives beneath them. The fact that pain did not completely destroy your faith is evidence that something eternal remains alive within you. Emotional suffering has a way of distorting vision. A discouraged heart begins interpreting everything through fear. Delays feel permanent. Rejection feels final. Silence feels like abandonment. But wounded emotions are not always reliable interpreters of truth. Feelings matter, but they do not possess absolute authority. A person can feel forgotten while still being deeply held by God. They can feel weak while heaven sees endurance growing within them. They can feel lost while divine direction is quietly unfolding ahead. Some of the strongest people are not those who avoided pain, but those who continued walking despite it. Strength is not emotional numbness. Strength is continuing to believe after heartbreak, continuing to pray after disappointment, continuing to love after betrayal, continuing to rise each morning even when the soul feels exhausted. God honors that kind of endurance because it reveals faith deeper than comfort. There are wounds you carry that no human apology could fully heal. Certain losses changed you permanently. Certain words spoken against you still echo in memory. Yet God specializes in restoring what suffering tried to steal. Not always by erasing scars, but by transforming them into places of wisdom, compassion, and spiritual depth. The healed soul often becomes gentler, wiser, and more capable of understanding others because it has known sorrow personally. Sometimes people believe healing means forgetting the pain entirely, but healing is often quieter than that. It is the gradual return of peace where fear once ruled. It is learning how to breathe again without constant heaviness. It is discovering that joy can still exist even after heartbreak. It is realizing the wound no longer controls your entire identity. Healing is not pretending the storm never happened. It is surviving the storm without allowing it to turn your heart permanently cold. God never promised a life untouched by suffering, but He does promise that suffering does not have final authority. The world may wound the heart, but heaven guards the soul. And though emotions may break under pressure, the deeper spiritual life within you can still remain unbroken, still capable of hope, still capable of trust, still capable of rising again even after seasons that seem determined to destroy everything beautiful within you. And when the soul begins rising again after seasons of pain, it slowly discovers that many delays were never meant to be permanent. Fear tried to convince you that the closed doors would remain closed forever, that the silence would never end, that the life ahead would always resemble the struggle behind you. Fear speaks with the void, sea of certainty even when it possesses no authority. It takes temporary seasons and paints them as eternal realities. It whispers that because nothing has changed yet, nothing ever will. But fear has always been a false prophet, and God is now removing delays that darkness tried to make permanent. There is a dangerous kind of exhaustion that settles into the human heart after prolonged disappointment. A person becomes so accustomed to waiting that they stop expecting movement altogether. They continue surviving, but inwardly they have surrendered hope. Dreams become quieter. Prayers become weaker. Vision shrinks until all that remains is the effort to simply endure another day. This is one of fear's greatest victories, not necessarily destruction, but resignation. If the enemy can convince a soul that change is impossible, he no longer needs chains because hopelessness itself becomes the prison. Many people listening have spent too long believing that their current condition is their final condition. They accepted limitations that heaven never declared over them. After enough rejection, they assume no meaningful connection would ever come again. After enough failure, they believe, new opportunities were no longer possible. After enough delay, they concluded that God had moved on to bless others while leaving them behind. Yet divine timing is not cancelled simply because human patience grows weak. C.S. Lewis understood how fear distorts reality. Fear does not merely warn of danger, it enlarges shadows until they appear greater than truth itself. A fearful soul begins interpreting every delay as proof of defeat. It cannot imagine restoration because disappointment has trained it to expect loss. But faith sees differently. Faith acknowledges difficulty while still believing God remains capable of interruption. Heaven has always interrupted impossible situations. Seas have parted. Giants have fallen. Empty hearts have been restored. The God who moves eternity is not limited by the discouragement of the present moment. There are delays in life that truly are protective. God sometimes closes doors because the timing, the people, or even your own condition are not yet prepared for what lies ahead. But there are also delays rooted in fear, hesitation, insecurity, and spiritual resistance. Some people have remained trapped in old seasons, not because God abandoned them, but because fear convinced them not to move when heaven said step forward. Fear creates imaginary walls and then teaches people to live inside them as though they are permanent. The tragedy is that fear often sounds reasonable. It reminds you of every previous disappointment. It points toward every failed attempt. It replays old wounds until caution feels wiser than courage. Slowly the soul stops risking belief altogether. Yet nothing meaningful in life is ever reached without walking beyond fear's boundaries. Every new chapter requires trust before evidence appears. God does not usually reveal the entire road ahead. He asks for movement first, obedience first, faith first. There are people who have delayed their own healing because fear told them vulnerability was too dangerous. Others delayed purpose because fear whispered they were not capable enough. Some delayed joy because fear insisted another heartbreak was inevitable. The enemy knows that if he cannot completely destroy a soul, he can still weaken it through intimidation. A fearful person may remain alive physically while spiritually standing still for years. But heaven is now confronting the lies that kept you there. Applied. God is breaking the agreement you unknowingly made with hopelessness. The delays fear declared permanent are beginning to loosen. What once seemed impossible no longer carries the same authority over your mind. You are starting to sense movement again, possibility again, expectation again. This does not mean every battle disappears overnight, but it does mean fear is losing its control over your vision of the future. There is power in realizing that your life is not finished simply because a chapter was painful. Delay is not death. Silence is not rejection. A closed season is not a closed destiny. God often waits until human strength collapses so the soul finally learns dependence upon him rather than certainty in circumstance. And when heaven begins opening what fear tried to seal shut, the change can happen faster than years of discouragement ever predicted. Some doors have remained closed so long that you stopped knocking. Some prayers have gone unanswered so long that you stopped asking. Yet God has not forgotten what he placed within your spirit before suffering tried to bury it. The dream may have gone quiet, but it was never fully dead. The calling may have felt distant, but it was never erased. Fear only delayed what heaven still intends to awaken. The chains breaking now may not always be visible externally at first. Sometimes the first miracle is internal. Courage returns. Hope returns. Desire returns. The soul begins believing again that life can move forward instead of endlessly repeating old pain. And once fear loses authority over the heart, many of the delays that once seemed immovable begin collapsing with surprising speed, making room for the very things you once believed would never arrive. And when those long-closed doors finally begin to open, many people discover that the person standing before them is no longer the same person who first prayed for them. Time, suffering, waiting, and hidden battles have changed you. The strength you now carry was not formed in comfort. It was built quietly in places no one applauded, during nights no one witnessed, and through burdens no one fully understood. The doors opening now require the strength you gained in secret, because the future ahead of you cannot be carried by the weaker version of yourself that existed before the struggle began. Human beings often pray for elevation without understanding the weight attached to it. They ask for greater opportunities, larger responsibilities, deeper influence, restored relationships, or long-awaited blessings, yet rarely consider the inner strength necessary to sustain such things wisely. God sees what people cannot. He knows that unprepared success can destroy a soul faster than hardship sometimes does. That is why heaven frequently focuses more on developing character than accelerating timing. A blessing arriving before maturity can become a burden instead of a gift. There were seasons when you believed nothing meaningful was happening because outward progress seemed absent. But while circumstances appeared still, God was strengthening hidden areas of your life. Patience was being developed. Discernment was growing. Endurance was taking root. You were learning how to survive disappointment without completely losing faith. You were learning how to continue moving even when emotions felt unstable. Those lessons were not wasted. They became part of the invisible strength now preparing you for what is ahead. C.S. Lewis understood that true strength is often formed through suffering rather than comfort. Easy seasons may reveal our personality, but difficult seasons reveal substance. Anyone can appear confident while life is favorable. But the soul refined through adversity carries a different kind of depth. It speaks with greater humility. It loves with greater compassion. It walks with greater wisdom because pain has stripped away illusion. The strongest people are rarely those who avoided hardship, they are usually those who endured it without allowing bitterness to completely consume them. There are doors opening now that would have crushed the earlier version of you. Certain opportunities require emotional maturity you once lacked. Certain blessings demand discipline that suffering had to teach you first. Certain relationships require wisdom you could only gain through heartbreak. God delayed some things not to deny you, but to protect both you and the future attached to your life. Had certain prayers been answered too early, pride may have ruined them, fear may have sabotaged them, or immaturity may have mishandled them entirely. Many people underestimate the value of hidden growth because the world celebrates visible achievement more than inward transformation. Yet heaven often measures success differently. God is deeply concerned with who you become while waiting, not merely with what you eventually receive. A person who gains everything externally while remaining weak internally is not truly prepared for lasting peace. but a soul strengthened privately can survive both hardship and blessing without losing itself. Think about how strength is built naturally. Muscles grow through resistance. Wisdom grows through mistakes. Courage grows through fear confronted rather than avoided. In the same way, spiritual strength develops through seasons where the soul is forced beyond comfort. Every lonely night you survived strengthened endurance. Every delayed answer deepened patience. Every moment you chose not to quit, despite exhaustion, developed resilience that easier seasons never could have produced. There are still scars within you, but scars do not always represent weakness. Sometimes they become evidence of survival. The person you are becoming now carries a steadiness that did not exist before. You have learned how temporary emotions can be. You have learned not every storm lasts forever. You have learned that even broken seasons eventually pass. This quiet wisdom becomes part right of the preparation for the doors now beginning to open. The tragedy is that some people continue seeing themselves only through the lens of old pain. They do not recognize how much strength has already been formed within them. They still think like the fearful version of themselves from years ago, unaware that suffering has already transformed them into someone far more capable than they realize. God sees the growth you overlook. He sees the endurance developed through tears, the maturity formed through silence, and the courage hidden beneath your weariness. The future ahead will require more than talent, emotion, or temporary excitement. It will require the kind of inner stability only hardship can teach. And though you once questioned why the road became so difficult, one day you will understand that the struggle itself was part of the preparation. The secret battles were creating visible strength. The hidden seasons were building public endurance. The lonely moments were shaping the soul that will soon walk through doors once thought impossible, carrying responsibilities and blessings that the older version of you could never have sustained wisely.